Minecraft SMPs are getting dull.
No, they aren't. SMPs can be good, and I know how. This video assumes that you're working with a lightly scripted SMP, although the contents of this video can still be useful in other fields as well. It'll be split into two sections, character design and writing design. Creating a scripted SMP and making it work is a delicate and complicated process. However, I believe I found a unique formula that can help simplify that into something that should hopefully work, assuming you execute it correctly. Think about your favorite moment from any piece of media that's meaningful to you in some way. It can be a show, a movie, a game, even another SMP video. I guarantee that the thing that made it impactful was the characters in it. And I mean, it's not hard to see why. You can't really care about the plot of something unless the story is able to make you care about the characters it impacts. Look at literally any fandom ever. People love getting attached to characters. So, that's our job. Make a character and get the audience to care about them. But how does one create an engaging, well-written character? That's a question that stumped authors since the dawn of fiction. However, I, a random-ass teenager, have the answer. I kid, but I have developed a solid 3-step formula for creating a consistent, memorable character. Step 1 is easily the most important. Find a motivation for your character. This is something that goes deeper than a goal they want to accomplish, like finding diamonds or becoming God. It's some kind of core value that drives them forward and dictates their every action. There are multiple methods to figuring this out, but my personal favorite is to simply ask, why? Take Jimbo Schmimbo here. Jimbo wants to build a house. However, that's not enough for us, and thus we must begin the process of asking why. Why does Jimbo want to build a house? Because he thinks it would be fun. Why does Jimbo find this fun? Because Jimbo is a creative person who feels pride when others appreciate his work and his efforts. Why does Jimbo feel pride for that? Jimbo cares deeply about what other people think of him. Why does Jimbo care so much about what other people think of him? Because Jimbo seeks validation from others. But why does Jimbo seek validation from others? Well, you see, when he was a little boy, Jimbo's father— Stop, no, you're in backstory territory now. This right here is what we want, a strong core motivation. Whether he knows it or not, Jimbo's unhealthy dependence on seeking validation and fulfillment from external forces will inform his every action. Every major choice he makes, every interaction he has, and everything he does will be in service to this motive. Be subtle about it, but make sure it's still there, present in every scene. Once you have a strong motivation picked out, you can begin step 2, the fun part. If all Jimbo had was just a motivation, he'd be nothing more than a mindless robot with a singular objective. So, take step 2 to humanize your character. Let's start off with a couple personality traits, say 3 positive ones and at least 1 negative one. Jimbo here is cooperative, dedicated, and honest, although he's also a bit naive and isn't the best at reading social situations. Once you've got these down, start thinking about how your character's motivation would be expressed with their personality traits and what they're most likely to do. A loud, abrasive person who's afraid of being forgotten would turn out far differently than a quiet, compassionate person dealing with the same thing. Jimbo, being cooperative and driven by a need for validation, would likely try to join a team or town or whatever the server's split into rather than trying to form his own group. He'd want to do whatever he could to help said group in the hopes of gaining recognition. However, his naivety makes me think he'd also be pretty vulnerable to manipulation. Consider things like these: what your character would do in any given scenario. If you've got any fun ideas, write them down. We can use them in the next step. Take the rest of step 2 to add whatever you like to your character, their design, extra details about them, that sort of thing. If you want them to have a backstory, now would also be a good time to add that in. Be sure to keep it short, simple, and have it instill your character's motivation in a clear, concise manner. After all, the real story is meant to be happening on the server, not during a flashback sequence or something. The third and final step is what ties everything together. You need a character arc. It can be positive or negative, it doesn't matter, they just can't stay stagnant. Your audience needs to be able to look at your character at the start of the server and at the end and see a clear difference between them. This is where you should really get everyone on your server talking to each other. Figure out how your own characters would react and influence each other. Would they be best friends or bitter rivals? Would that change over time? Would they help each other become better people, or would they exemplify each other's worst traits, becoming a villainous duo for the server to reckon with? Get creative with it, and make sure to write everything down so you don't forget it. Let's say Jimbo joins a team that, for whatever reason, is antagonistic to the rest of the server. They give him all the respect he wants, and he fights alongside them. Jimbo becomes a force to be reckoned with and grows to be feared by the rest of the server. It is still validation, after all. Or, what if Jimbo joins a more heroic team? They congratulate him for everything he does for them, but also help him realize that his dependence on other people for fulfillment is unhealthy. Jimbo eventually grows to lean into his more compassionate, cooperative traits, doing the things that make him happy instead of living for other people. Those are solid examples of negative and positive character arcs respectively. They're based on Jimbo's motivation, and they're affected by his personality traits. But what's so awesome about this is that Jimbo isn't even the main character. Nobody is. Jimbo will be able to affect the arcs of other characters as well until we have a web of interconnected characters that, if well written enough and performed consistently, will be able to tell a story mostly on their own. Your script isn't necessarily a linear narrative, but more so a way to keep track of everything that's going on. This is great for the audience as well, since it encourages them to watch multiple people's perspectives to get the full view of what's going on. Instead of everyone being locked into a linear plot that only shifts to accommodate its own flaws, we get a natural, adapting story. When using this method on your server, communication is key. This thing will pretty much fall apart if nobody knows what everyone else is doing. Everyone also needs to stay in character pretty much the whole time to be able to maintain consistency across the SMP. That's about as far as my process extends when it comes to characters. The idea is pretty much to develop a strong enough character ahead of time so that improv will be easier and stay consistent. Anyone is free to apply or adapt this to their own server, unless your name is Jake. Anyone is free to apply or adapt this to their own server, preferably with some kind of credit. And if you want to see this method in action, my friends and I are starting up a server called the Arc SMP, running on this exact premise. You can join our Discord using the link in the pinned comment to submit an application to our server. It needs to meet everything listed in the requirements channel to be eligible for review, but I highly encourage you give it a shot. Now, this section on storytelling advice is more so geared towards individuals making videos on a server running on the previously described system, although I believe it's still useful for general content creation too. Tip 1 is about your editing. Don't be flashy. That may sound counterintuitive, but assuming you're working on a server with the character system I just laid out, your goal should be to tell a meaningful story. And for that to come across, your viewer shouldn't have to excavate your story from under 17 layers of transition effects. Sometimes less is more, and it's okay to just let the audience sit with something for a little while instead of immediately trying to divert their attention to something else. How can you expect anyone to get invested in the story you're telling if you never give them any time to process it? White Pine, while not exactly being an SMP, is a great example of this. It's filled with these long, lingering shots that force you to actually sit and pay attention to what's happening on the screen. It really helps to nail just how lonely the mansion is. A lot of modern SMP videos seem more interested in keeping your attention in a stranglehold to squeeze you for all the watch time you're worth, and to be blunt, I feel insulted as a viewer. I want to be able to actually engage with the video on its own level, not have my hand held while some narration does all the thinking for me. Yes, Captain Obvious, I know that person is trying to fight you. You didn't have to yell that at me 4 times in a row while pointing to him with a big red arrow. The point is, editing is necessary, but it's also a balance. Do what's needed to show what's important, but don't drown out your narrative with it. All that shows the viewer is that you don't have any confidence in your storytelling capabilities and are afraid to actually let them think about your video. Most people prefer sincerity over apathy, and your audience will be able to tell the difference. Tip 2 is on how to structure your fight scenes. Obviously, this is irrelevant if you're playing on a server with a more chill storyline, but if you aren't, then you're more than likely to have a few of these come up. Fight scenes pose a unique challenge when it comes to storytelling. On one hand, they're flashy and cool and fun to edit, and on the other hand, they're pretty much disconnected from the rest of what's going on. It is pure gameplay. Characters don't develop meaningfully or change until it's over. There are some ways to circumvent this, like a character having a change of mind mid-fight or a sudden burst of determination, but once again, your homie's got a formula. It's actually just a smaller collection of tips, but formula sounded better at the time. First up, you need to have a good reason to be fighting. Every battle should be able to really just be an argument, and some of them should probably stay as arguments instead of escalating. Yes, it's a trial of combat, but it's really a trial of a character's ideals. They might be using swords instead of words, but it should still be over the same things. Second, tie your fights to your character arc. We're already using a fight scene as symbolism for an argument, so why not take it a step further and use it as symbolism for character development? A fight scene in your video is likely to be a pivotal moment, and so it should also represent a pivotal change in your character. You can take a lot of creative liberties here. Maybe they learn something beforehand that gives them the will to fight, or they overcome some kind of internal struggle that gives them the strength to win. The benefit of being on a scripted server is that fights don't simply have to be a contest of skill. We can do cool things like this and use them as metaphors. Your audience will be far more invested as well because your fight actually means something now. Tip 3 is to stay as organized as possible. Make sure everyone on the server knows what's going to be happening and what they need to be doing. This system is built on communication, and without it, it falls apart. I'd recommend creating a Discord forum for everyone to share their characters on and keeping a public Google document of the current plot. Everyone needs to have access to the same information. Don't derail the story by not telling anyone what you're doing. Involve the rest of the server in the scripting scripting process as well. This is a story they're going to be a part of, so make sure they can have fun with it too. A disorganized, disinterested server will become a dead server very quickly. So that's about all I had for you today. If you want to know a little more about the technical side of things, I'd recommend my friend Flux's video on making better Minecraft content. It's some solid advice, and I'm not just saying that because there's a small synopsis of my character theory in there. And once again, if you want to be part of a server running that character theory, the Arc SMP is linked in the description and looking for new members. With that, I sincerely wish you luck on your next project, and that wherever you are, you have a good day.